Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sharin Stories. I'm your host, Peaks, with my two beautiful co-hosts, Sarah States and Paul Santos. This is not a therapy session. You will not find mental health professionals here, nor are we a substitute for said people. We are just people sharing our stories with mental health. On today's episode, we get to talk to the creator of Meisner and Music, an insanely talented operatic singer and performer, and an all-around joyous human being. Jillian Paige can be found on Instagram at Jillian Paige Lady or through at Meisner and Music, where she will make you laugh, learn, and relate to her everyday life. She has been on the stage countless times and wants to transform lives through music. I know she has so much to share with us, and I cannot wait to hear more about her journey. So everyone, please welcome Jillian Paige.
Woo!
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 Jillian.
Thanks for that intro.
Of course, of course. So I'd like to just know a little bit more about you, kind of 2 minutes of a background on who Jillian is before we get going into your story too.
Yeah, I'm Jillian Paige. My maiden name is Jillian Gottlieb, but I'm an actor, and there's a Jillian Gottlieb that, like, usually when I mention her name, people are like, "Oh yeah." So I started using Jillian Paige in 2012. Paige is my mom's name, but I'm from Kentucky and I live in New York right now, pursuing the arts and teaching a really freeing acting class called Meisner in Music, which is this Meisner technique is really a practice in mindfulness and presence, but it really helps actors. And then I feel singers get out of their heads. And the arts is a huge part of my story and also kind of carries me into mental health aspects that I'm excited to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm sure they played a pretty large role in kind of helping you here and there.
Right.
I'm so excited to kind of hear what that role is. And I'm just going to let you take it away, Jillian, and we'll jump in when we can.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess my story begins, I would go even back to this sliding door moment of when I first graduated college for a classical voice degree. The next step is going to grad school. Everyone in the opera field is like, pretty much, I know I'm going to graduate school. And I didn't get in the first year to Oklahoma City University, which was my first choice. So I spent a year in Nashville. And then the second year that I auditioned, I did get in for a master's in music theater. And when I got to Oklahoma City, I was at an audition, and there were not a lot of straight men, first of all, and then cute straight men who didn't have a huge ego, except for this one guy that I met named Michael Schaefer, but he had a girlfriend, and I don't play with that. So I met him at the beginning of the year. I knew he broke up with his girlfriend in October, and we had the same voice teacher, and he tried it, but I was like, I'm not a rebound girl, so let's give this some time. And then around March of the next year, I believe I invited him over to watch Game of Thrones. He had not seen it, and I felt that he was a bearded, burly guy. And I was like, oh, you of all people need to be seeing this. So he would come over after our voice lessons and we'd be watching it, but nothing was happening. So I was like, I've got to do something here. And I bought a blanket. And I was like, oh, it's so chilly in here. And so finally he came over and we started the Game of Thrones dates began to be more romantic, and we would cuddle. And then we started dating in March of 2013. And then we dated for a year and a half, and things were getting pretty serious. And we were about to move to Chicago together, where he was going to go to DePaul University for a master's in vocal performance. And for the last 6 months, this was 2014 now, he had a canker sore on his tongue, and it was just annoying. And he even went to a dentist in summer, and the dentist said, we might biopsy it. And I was like, Michael, that's really serious. And he's like, no, it's no big deal. And they, for whatever reason, you all didn't end up biopsying it in June, which just makes me so mad looking back. But as with anyone's story, you just kind of take that as everything happened the way it should, I guess. But it was so infuriating. But then in the fall, so months went by, it was registration week for him for DePaul, and he finally got an appointment with an amazing ENT in Chicago. And when they looked at it, immediately they were like, oh yeah, this is probably cancer. And I was like, wait, what? So they biopsied it, and it was already stage 3. This is now September of 2014. And I remember I was moving my stuff out of Oklahoma City, and he texted me. They think it's probably cancer. And I was like, Michael, you can't text stuff like that. And I had a 12-hour drive transporting my stuff from Oklahoma City to my home in Louisville, Kentucky. And that entire drive, I was bawling my eyes out. The only playlist that I had created were comedy shows and musical theater albums, which is the last thing that I wanted to listen to when I just found out my boyfriend had cancer. So we decided to go to Texas, where he had his first surgery. This is in October. And the doctor comes out and they're like, the margins are clear. There was no cancer in the lymph nodes. This is amazing news. And we're celebrating. And we went back to Chicago for his radiation treatment for 6 weeks. And unbeknownst to me, Michael was planning on proposing after his last radiation treatment. We were planning a fancy dinner where we were going to celebrate the last radiation treatment and be like cancer-free, which in and of itself is a whole thing. If you all have talked to anyone or if you've been through a cancer journey, there's not really an end. You can reach a 5-year remission and kind of be like, great. But there's never an end in sight. So we were just planning a cancer-free celebration, knowing that radiation itself was over. And literally, you all, the last week of radiation, he's like, feel this. And he had a lump in his neck. And I was like, no, I'm sure it's just, muscle tension or something. And I remember we went to his radiation treatment and he had it's not called an intern. What are they on Grey's Anatomy where you're like studying to be a doctor? Residents? I think
resident, yeah.
Yes. He had a resident he'd gotten really close to who was about our age. And Michael told me later that he had told the resident, hey, I'm going to propose to my girlfriend after radiation's over. I'm so excited for life to begin. And so when he got this lump biopsied, I remember the resident he had been close to and a doctor came in. And the resident was looking at the ceiling. He was shaking. His eyes were filled with tears. And the doctor is telling us, so we did the biopsy. It is cancer, meaning that the cancer had spread from his tongue to his throat. Not only was that so bad, but it was the fact that the margins had been so clear that for the cancer to have spread meant that it was really aggressive and smart. So anyway, I'm watching this resident crying and I was so mad. I was like, this isn't your life. You don't know us. And instead of having compassion for him, I was filled with rage that like someone would be crying for me, because my coping mechanism throughout the journey was like, this is going to be fine. We're going to persist. So for someone to be crying on my behalf, I was furious. So we had to move to Texas. We lived with Michael's parents for 5 months, which was a journey. They're incredibly conservative, and I had to sneak wine in my room to drink it at night. One time it spilled on the white carpet. I know. And it was really tough. Passive aggressive notes left for me in the morning, family meetings with Michael that I was not invited to about my behavior. I mean, it was so rough. So he got chemo, which I really think was the beginning of the end. And the cancer ended up spreading to his lungs. And I think chemo really took it out of him. I think if I ever get cancer, of course you want to live. But seeing what chemotherapy did to him, I'm like, darn, that's another step along the road that I'm not sure I would take again. But we soldiered on. And before his diagnosis and during, I was very happy-go-lucky and that sort of toxic positivity mindset where Michael and I both were like, no, I don't want to hear anything negative. I remember at one point a doctor said, we were talking about moving to Louisville, Kentucky in 5 years. And they said, oh, no, I don't think you have 5 years. And then he left the room and we were like, wait, what? And you all, it was so bizarre. When you have cancer, no one person, maybe unless you're filthy rich, is in charge of your case. So what was really unnerving was that we had a surgeon and we were like, okay, he's our doctor. And then no, once you're pushed into radiation, then he's your doctor. And then she's your doctor when you're in chemo. So we had all these different people on the case. So someone would drop a bomb like that, and you were just left with like, wait, is that true? So throughout the journey, unless I'm blocking it out, no one ever said terminal. No one ever told us that that doing chemotherapy was not a good option. So we held on hope until the very end. We got married in May of 2015, and then he died relatively unexpectedly 11 days later. This lump, they did do surgery on it, but the scar never healed. So we had to dress this wound, and the cancer kept growing. So what really ended up happening was that one night he called out to me. I think he knew that it was his last night. And so I had dressed the wound, and then he said, I don't want to go back to sleep. I'm going to stay up and watch a movie. And I was like, okay. So I went back to sleep, and then he called for me, and he was bleeding from the neck. And we did get to go to the hospital and be with his parents for his last words and last moments. So it was such a blessing to be near him at the end and have that sort of bedside moment. But it was really sudden, and it wasn't like he was in the hospital bed for 2 weeks and we knew the end was near. It was really like we went on a date the night before to the movies. So it was just really interesting. And then after he passed, I threw myself into more positivity and denial. And I look back on it, and we had just moved into an apartment in Dallas. And so I lived in this town where I didn't have any family and friends for a year. And I'm amazed that happened, because I was like, this is totally fine. And I threw myself into work and people. And then it wasn't until I moved to New York a couple years later, actually a year later in 2016, to where I started grieving. And I've been seeing my therapist for 5 years. And that has helped me so much to finally have a safe space. But they say in loss, it's so messed up when people say this, but they say year 2 is even worse. And it's like when you're in year 1, you're like, I don't want to hear that. Okay. But I think year 2 is worse-ish, because finally you've been through all the firsts, every holiday and anniversary. And then I felt like in year 2, I finally let that guard down of positivity and resilience, and finally was like, that sucked. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jillian, for sharing. That was something I cannot even imagine in my life, and I cannot picture what it's like to go through. And for you to come on here and just even talk about it is beyond unbelievable. I do have a bunch of questions, but I do want to start before I ask any of the questions that I know this is a dark topic for you, and it's something that we don't need to always dive as deep into it as I might ask. So if any of my questions are out there and you do not want to respond, you do not have to. I just want to, because we are going to obviously talk about, this traumatic experience to you in your life. But I do want to kind of take a look at this time during chemo, if we can, and really talk about the mental toll that it had on your husband, sounding amazing husband, and the toll it has on a family, and kind of the effects it might have mentally for a lot of people going through it, if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. He was provided with a therapist in the hospital, which was really great. And it was hard because when he would come home from a session, I would be like, what did you talk about? And he would say, the end of life and how I feel going through this process and knowing I might not have kids and have a long life with you. And I can't imagine what those sessions were like. And I think it scared me because I was holding so fiercely onto hope, and I didn't want to be talking about the end of life. But I'm so grateful that he had a therapist to go over that dark stuff with. I cannot imagine what that was like for the therapist. And we had a hospice doctor, which again, I didn't know what the word hospice meant. So we kept calling her the pain doctor. And I look back and I'm like, well, of course he was terminal. He had a hospice doctor. Anyway, she was incredible. And she cried with us a few times and was like, this cancer can't take away who you are. She came to our wedding. She was just incredible for Michael. But he luckily kept a journal. And so I got to go back and read some of his passages after he died. And it was the strength that he felt he had to have for all of us was incredible. I have a lot of guilt about making him feel like I couldn't hold that for him and that he needed to stay positive for me. It went back and forth. So I remember one night I was washing dishes. It felt like Michael and I each held the hope at different times. So there was one night when I was washing dishes and I said, at what state, if anything got really bad, would you want me to make a decision to pull the plug or to say, like, let's not try to fix this? And he was like, why are you saying that? And I was like, oh my gosh, never mind, never mind. So I will say that we kind of threw the ball back and forth of like, let's just pretend that you're not going to die. But he did write a lot about how much pain he was in. And there were a lot of doctor's appointments where they would ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in? And from how he was acting with me, I would have thought a 5. And then he would say like an 8. And I would look at him like, wait, you're at an 8? He just was so peaceful and kind and strong. I'm hesitant to even use the word strong because it's got a nasty taste in my mouth of like people being like, you're so strong to Michael or to me. It feels like the pain is disregarded almost with that. So anyway, but he was very strong.
I can absolutely tell that. I'd say like your guilt that you felt, I think that's more a testament to how amazing he was and how much of a burden he wanted to keep off people than it is to you not doing what you needed to do, because there's no doubt in my mind that you loved him, and there's no doubt in my mind that you did everything in your power. And I can't, and just like I said, cannot imagine. But I do want to know a little bit about when you got the first news versus the second news. You at both times you didn't really know. You were very optimistic. It sounds like both times. Did you handle the 2 times differently at all?
That's a really good question. Yeah. I jump into action. So in that way, I would say I handled both of them similarly, but definitely the way our family unit, Michael's parents and I handled the second news, it was the first time we were like, okay, we are going to move to Texas. We're going to get this surgery and then radiation afterward. It was very positive. And then for the surgery to have been so successful, I'm doing air quotes for people not watching, but that was a gift. And we got very positive about it all and believed in miracles and everything. But the second time there was a wait. And basically after his second surgery on the neck, they pulled us into a room, which you never want. He, the first time, came out into the waiting room and was like, joyous news. And everyone in the waiting room got to feel the joy with us. And then after the second surgery, he's like, let's go in this little room here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? My cat has some stuff to say about this.
Aww.
But the second time, the wait was palpable. And we were slower with the joy, not even joy. We were slower with the action because I think we knew it was just really rough. And he told us after the second surgery, this is like a race and the cancer is going 60 miles per hour and we're going at 30 and we can hopefully stop it and hopefully catch up, but it's going to be a hard one. And so I did jump right back into action. Michael did want to write a Facebook post and letting people know and keeping them in touch right away. So we were both like, all right, how are we going to make this announcement? But there was a definite heaviness to it the second time.
I'm curious, well, hearing your story, you mentioned so many different sort of like feelings, like acceptance, and then there was like rage and frustration, which I can understand because like, I think, I haven't had that many experiences like within the hospital system or that sort of arena, but family members that have and stuff, they talk sometimes about how frustrating it can be because, like you mentioned, like there's a lot of different players involved in these things, and there can be a lot of confusion, sometimes misunderstanding. No one's really there to like really walk you through what's going on. So I think like that when you're in such a, time is of the essence, like sort of situation, like not getting those things like can be, it's just so frustrating. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, sort of after, everything happened and your husband, he passed, like, moving into this sort of phase of like toxic positivity, as you put it,
Yeah.
like, where did all of those feelings sort of go? And did they re-manifest themselves in your healing process, like after your move?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So again, with the action element of the way I coped, threw myself right back into dating. And so I got to put a lot of those frustrations on the disappointments in the dating pool and disappointment in men. And then about 6 months after Michael passed, I dated a guy for 9 months. And when he broke up with me, right after I'd moved to New York, I was devastated. And it was like the worst breakup I've ever gone through. And I started seeing my therapist because of this breakup. I was like, I have to get over this guy. And that's where I discovered, like, oh, this is delayed grief. So all of this stuff that I had felt was put on this guy that I didn't care a lot. He was not a great person to date. So I was like, why do I feel so sad about breaking up with him? This is meant to be. And it was because all of that had been pushed aside and I'd been pouring it into the action of dating and the action of moving to New York. So right after Michael died too was when I discovered the Meisner technique, which is just the belief that to be here and be present, we just have to put one foot in front of the other and be only focused on the current moment, which is like a simple concept, but it's not easy, right? Everyone knows this. So when I first started the Meisner technique, I was laughing my way through it. I was giggling. I was like, oh no, I'm not bothered by anything. And the whole thing is, are you all familiar with AEDP methodology? It's like a form of
Oh,
therapy. Oh, it's so incredible. It's like, okay, I'm going to butcher this. Someone is going to listen and be like, that's not what it's called, but it's like accelerated. All right, never mind. I'm not even going to try. Look up AEDP. Basically, it's a form of therapy where you just sit with your feelings and say, I'm feeling closed off. I'm feeling really mad and my fingers are tingling with that. And I feel like my chest is caving in. That is very similar to the Meisner technique. And throughout all of that, I was like, I feel happy. Yeah, I feel joyous. And then there was one day where we did an exercise where we ask what's called a provocative question, anything that provokes any sort of emotion. And a woman asked me, is your life derailed? And this was when I was still in Dallas. And I had to repeat back to her over and over, is my life derailed? Is my life derailed? And I'm laughing. I'm like rolling my eyes at that question. And then something just broke in me where I started bawling. And it turned the page for me with this technique that I now teach and love, that it feels like turbulence to get to the other side of truth. And I think all of the dating, all of the giggling that I was doing was the turbulence of like, something is boiling under here and I don't want to let the lid off. But then when you feel safe enough to let the lid off, whenever you do, then it's so much more freeing than keeping it on. But even now, as I teach Meisner, if someone feels not ready to let their lid off, I don't push it, because I firmly believe that year and a half or so that I said, no, Michael died, but I'm fine. I think I needed that. And I don't regret serially dating. And I don't regret like throwing myself into life and healing and then grieving, a year and a half, 2 years in. I think that's exactly the way I needed to do it.
do you know of anyone who does Meisner that's not an actor or a singer? Like, do people do it as sort of like a therapy or a healing process?
I do. I can't remember her name, but someone reached out to me on Instagram and she does it as more of a methodology with her clients. But yeah, it's been interesting reading more about therapeutic methods and how similar it is to Meisner. I think everyone has their light bulb tool that kind of feels right to them, whether it changes or stays the same throughout their lives. Meisner is mine, but I know that people either use the Meisner technique or similar things like AEDP, where it's just saying how you feel or sitting with the emotions and being okay with that is so similar.
I'm gonna stay on the topic of therapy because I think you seem to have a good relationship with one, and you seem to have liked the I guess progression that has been made.
Yeah.
So I am always interested because every time it's different. What if you can? This is an impossible question, but if you can pinpoint something that really makes your therapist stand out, or the way that they conduct themselves that makes it easy for you to work with them and kind of find this progression with someone?
I think it's two things that come right to mind. And one for me is that I really love to take care of people and keep the ball in the air, which is a good quality as like a teacher and things, but not so good quality as someone who needs to just be and allow the moment to be what it is. So sometimes I'll go into our sessions and be like, "Hi, how are you?" And she's like, "I'm fine. How are you?" And she will, if we ever start talking about her, she'll quickly divert it back to me, and not in a way that's like I'm intruding, I don't feel, but in a way that's like, this isn't about me and this is not a friendship where we're gabbing about our lives. This needs to be Jillian's space. And that's uncomfortable for me. I want to make her feel like we're talking about her a little bit and that it's equal, but it's not. And I think having a therapist that is like, this isn't for us to make small talk or daily conversation. This is about maybe being uncomfortable and talking about what's going on really with me. And then a part of that ties into it, which is that she'll allow for a lot of silence, and it's uncomfortable. We don't have to talk all the time to be processing. And she allows for, in the silence, a lot of stuff to come up that I think if I was just rambling, it wouldn't.
I feel pretty similar in the sense that I shouldn't have said similar. I'm almost the exact opposite in the way that I kind of looked at therapy, because I felt silence is okay with me, but I overthink it all the time.
Yeah.
Like I am fine with being in silence, but if I am in my head, then I am in my head, and that is just silence now becomes no longer silence for me.
Yeah.
So I also feel like I need a connection with the people that I'm talking with, especially if for something like this where I'm giving personal information, that connection needs to just be between us, where I know the connection is never without it. So like the people that I talk to are people that are far away. They are friends of mine, but friends through traveling. And like, those are the people that I'll like kind of air out my dirty laundry or whatever you want to call it. Right.
Yeah.
So I find it so crazy that everybody kind of has this different outlook on therapy, and that's why I kind of wanted to ask to see exactly what yours did and see if there's something specific. But I do like the idea of each therapist probably finding their patient over time, right? Like It's not, I think I'm expecting someone to be able to do it in 2-3 sessions,
Right.
whereas like if you got to stick through something like this to actually recognize if you actually like this person and if you want to move forward with them. So I do find that amazing. I'm going to jump back.
I think what you said about the silence is like so true. Like that used to make me so uncomfortable, and I'd be like, can you prompt me to like say or ask me a question? But the magic happens, I think, for me in the silence, because that's when I'm able to be like, this is really uncomfortable. What does she like? Why is there the silence here? And it really prompts me to like inwardly, like I realize like, okay, I can take a breath here, and then I can really say what needs to be said. And like that really, but getting over that sort of like hump of like, what is she expecting or he expecting of me in this moment? Like took a lot of time, but that's when the magic happens, I think, at least for me.
Yeah. And we talk about it. I'm like, I hate that we're just sitting here in silence. And she's like, I know it's uncomfortable for me too, but that's where, like you said, Sarah, the magic happens. And when I first started meeting with her, Andrew, I was like you. I was like, no, girl, I'm here to get over this breakup. What are you doing talking about my childhood? And now I've been with her for 5 years, but it's been a 5 years of up and downs and annoyance with her, and times when I've been like, I don't need to see you every week. And she's like, yes, you do. So it hasn't been 5 years of just complete meshing. And in fact, she just told me that she's not going to take insurance anymore. So we're going to terminate in June. And I'm heartbroken, but I think it's the right thing. But I'm already, like a breakup, I don't even want to date right now. I'm like, I'm already annoyed at someone else, the thought of someone else. I just want to be with Cassandra. And like, but it's good. And there was a part of me that was like, wait, can I still afford her? Maybe I can see her quarterly. And it's like, no, you've done 5 years. It's time, and she's moving on, and it's got to end sometime. So this is a good time. But yeah, I don't want to say that it's been a 5 years of like instant connection. It was hard at first, and I was annoyed that she didn't want to just talk about the current breakup I wanted to get over quickly.
It sounds like the 5 years, though. I mean, the fact that you have this much closure on and this much acceptance of whatever's about to happen, it's like, it sounds like she really did do a fantastic job kind of helping you over these breakups, I guess, to a certain extent.
She's awesome.
Which kind of brings you to like the human connection, and like when you are going through something and you're going through that time in Texas, having to fight a family at the exact same time, how difficult is it, and like to handle that stressor on the side? And on top of that, how important is it to have people around you who are under the same mindset, under the same, like goal as, I mean, you guys are under the same goal, of course, but the same way of getting there?
Oh my gosh. That's beautifully put, Andrew, because we did have the same goal, which is like get Michael well, but they were extremely conservative Christian. I am not. It was just interesting the way that they wanted to get to that goal and the way that I wanted to, but I was under their roof. So I had very little say. And I also have done a lot of thinking, I'm probably going to cry, thinking about losing a child. And I thought when he passed, like, this is the worst for me, because he was my partner and everyone else gets to go home to their partners and grieve with them, which is true. But now I'm remarried. And it's not that that replaces Michael, but it is that I now have another husband, and Michael's parents still don't have Michael. So I just can't imagine. I have a lot of forgiveness for what happened. A lot of weird stuff went down after he died, like asking for the ring back. That was probably the worst. It was, anyway, just not great. They got really territorial and cut off. They wanted to cut me off, and I felt discarded. But I also can't imagine what that was like. And I think that I represented a lot of his cancer journey. I was like this girlfriend that, I think that chapter, I am now the living embodiment of that chapter of Michael's life. And so if they can disconnect from that, that makes a lot of sense for me, for their healing. In addition to the differences we had religiously and politically, I'm sure that it's easier for them to not think of me as a good person. I'm still in touch with his mom, and that relationship brings me so much joy. And what's weird is that she and I butted heads the most when he was alive. And the people that I got along with when he was alive, they're the people that cut me off. It's very strange. But the relationship I have with her is so dear to me. And even though it was really hard during, I also cannot imagine what it was like to lose a child and have this new woman in his life and kind of be like, I can't help but think that there was a connection in their minds between Michael's cancer and this woman that I am. And if we can blame someone, let's blame her.
Overall, level of empathy is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, like, the thought of blaming, like, I think not to like
Yeah.
interject with my own experience. But I think like with loss, I think like when my brother passed away, like my parents needed someone to blame. Like it
Mm,
was no one's fault, but
right.
they needed that energy to go toward someone. And who was that person going to be? The person that was the closest or like whatever. And I mean, they had no right to really do that because there was no involvement, but that's what happened. And I can understand needing to like funnel your emotion into something. I mean, it's not saying it's right, but I can understand where that, like why that happened.
Completely.
I mean, yeah, I definitely can see how the first thing you're going to be doing is looking for a reason.
Yeah.
You have to look for a reason. It is like, this is unexplainable at this point. To any mind, that is unexplainable. You can never, beyond your wildest dreams, you're never going to get here. And like you said, like I said, the empathy level you show towards these parents to understand kind of that in the end, where you initially started with, this is hardest on me, this is the worst for me, and to where you are now, where it's like there was struggle for a ton of people around me.
Yeah.
And to discount anybody's struggle right in these situations can be detrimental to yourself,
Yeah.
as you start to blame those people around you.
I have a question about faith because
Hmm.
since they were conservative Christian, I'm curious, like, if you had any frustrations about that, because, like, I know,
Yeah.
like, within my own family who's conservative Christian, a lot of the sort of like frustration that came from me personally was because they put all of their faith and sort of like support and trust in God in that moment. And for me, like, that was too lofty of an idea to like really help. Like it just didn't seem like it seemed like grasping at straws. And like I understand faith is like a very serious thing, but like it I was like, but look at what's happening down here, like right here, like this is like now and this is happening. And I felt like that was really hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
And it led to a lot of frustration later on. And I think in like the grieving process, like I thought about that a lot because I just wanted like answers,
Yeah.
not answers that were not coming from God. Like I wanted like real factual stuff. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any sort of feelings around that or
Oh, I'm with you completely, Sarah. And it's interesting that you say lofty because I would even argue that the loftier thing, because it's my opinion, is not being able to have answers and just be like, God is good, creator, love, universe, whatever you want to call it. That source is incredible and life is so beautiful. And this really shitty thing can exist and took Michael and took your brother. So I was frustrated with the need for answers in like, okay, so for instance, the mom said, I did a Bible study this morning and I looked up a passage from Job, which is about this man who suffered constantly. And the passage that she found was that he will not die from this illness. And I clung to that. I was like, okay, cool. So she got a really religious message that he's not going to die from this illness. I cling to that. I would look at a sunset. I bought it. I bought into it. And I was like, okay, if these people are religious and I'm not, I've got to do something to like wager my bets with God. And so I too would pray a lot. And we believed in miracles. And we would post on Facebook and be like, prayer warriors, like, please help. That is not wrong. It just makes me mad after he died because I'm like, man, we spent so much energy hoping for a result instead of being open to that the healing might come in death. And it is God or what, again, whatever you want to call it. For me, the word God is okay, but God is going to, I think that the flow of life works the way it should. And I don't believe that everything happens for a reason. I don't think Michael's death was like, oh, yeah, that was for some greater purpose. But I do think that if we go with the flow of life, universe, spirit, love is going to figure it out for us. And so for me to say, God is this big judge in the sky with a white beard, and I'm going to pray to him for this one result that I will accept nothing else, it was putting that whole process in a box and wasting a lot of energy on trying to live when we could have lived a little bit fuller with no answers and with being okay with death. And I wonder what that would have looked like.
Yeah, so it's like two sides to the coin, right? You have the idea where God, something like this, or some higher power can give you hope until the last moment. And that's lovely. That's wonderful. That is awesome. And then on top of that, you have the other side where it says like, no, I just sat there and denied for a year.
I know.
And just laid on the sideline. I mean, of course not, but like did not grieve exactly the way I wanted to. Now you have that 1.5 year period of time where you are out there denying because you were not expecting it. You did hope. You did have that hope until the last moment. And now all these things are super hard to get over. And you go through that relationship where it seems like where the breakup is impossible, but you recognize that, no, that was just where I was in my life. That's the grieving process that could have happened or could have been a part of, before this passing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of transition this. We don't have a lot of time. I'm going to kind of transition this into how we are today and where you're at right now, Jillian.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that getting into a new relationship after Michael and after this 9 months and after this process with your therapist, it's got to be hard to get to that serious point now. There's got to be always kind of something like in the back of your mind, as a bit of a distraction or a pushback for you. And I want to know, how did you kind of get this courage, get this just strength to move forward and kind of get to the point where you now are, in another happy marriage with someone who clearly understands what you went through. And obviously this is not something you don't share with them. So how did you get to this point? Sorry, it's a lot of rambling.
No, will you help me understand what you mean by something in the back of my mind?
Like I would say, I would imagine that when you have gone through something like this, you can get to the point where you're picturing the worst, where you think, this relationship is so amazing to me, but like there's always a fear of something, right?
Yeah. And
how do you get over that hump and just get back to where you were?
Thank you. Yes, that is real. It has been really interesting. Has anyone watched the Netflix documentary series Surviving Death? Oh,
no.
Sarah, you would love it. There's
a lot of people have recommended it.
Like bawling. It was really good. There's a couple episodes on mediums, which was strange, but everything else is very emotional and beautiful. But yes, so I am fully, we'll see what happens, but I feel like I hope we make it to be old in rocking chairs together. But I go into this marriage like, who knows? And as we save for retirement, even, I'm sort of like, I hope I get to see this money, but we never know. And my sweet husband is like, la, 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 la. Like I said, you all, it was so bad the other day. I had this intuition that if I ever died, and I had this overwhelming message that was like, tell Wes, if you die, you're going to send him a partner and there's going to be something to do with a butterfly around her. So to me, this is a very sweet, normal thing to say. And I was like, babe, I just want to tell you, like, if I die early, I'm going to send you another partner and something's going to have to do with a butterfly. I don't know what it is, but you'll see a representation with a butterfly. And he started crying so hard. He's not a crier either. And he was like, why are you saying that? And I was like, oh no, I just had that message in my head. And who knows if it was actually intuition or if I'm going to live till I'm 101 and he's long gone before me. But to me, those conversations are completely valid. And I'm, when we look at having children and things, I'm like, okay, so I might die in childbirth. And like, I just like feel very practical about these things and that we might not make it to 99 together. And for him, that seems like, why would we even talk about this? I think that it has a little bit to do with stoicism. I've like learned a little bit about that mindset, and it feels beautiful to me to be like, let's just have stuff in place so that if someone dies, we're not scrambling for life insurance money or, wondering. I don't know. I feel peaceful almost planning that we won't make it to be old together, but he doesn't want to hear it.
Yeah, I worked in life insurance for a while, and I kind of had these conversations to a certain extent with people where it's like, you obviously don't want to talk about that kind of
Right.
stuff, but it is super important to be prepared in any regard. I no longer work in life insurance, so I'm not trying to sell insurance to anybody right now, just so we understand. But it is important to be prepared, and just kind of understand that stuff does happen. But overall, Jillian, you can just tell through your openness, your strength, at where you are now. You've learned so much through your grieving process with Michael, and now where you are now with your current husband. It's quite amazing, and you should be so proud of yourself. And I have really
you have so much grace when you speak about everything. It's just, I don't even know. It just makes me admire you even more as a human, which I already did.
This was an amazing episode, and I love speaking with you. Though it was definitely on the verge of tears a few times. I do want you to really quickly, as a lot of people in this world have gone through traumatic experiences, tell them a little bit about what you do, plug your Instagram, like anything that you would like them to know where they can kind of learn a little bit from you, or just have someone to talk to, if you're okay with that.
Yeah. You all mentioned Jillian Paige lady at the beginning of this, which is my more just like me being an idiot Instagram, but at Jillian Paige, Paige with an I in it, I do talk about the processing and the grief a little bit more in like a blog format. And I actually sit down to write those. And then if anyone even loves singing, doesn't have to be a singer, Meisner, Meisner, in music is our Instagram, and meisnerinmusic.com. We have these really intimate, I hope safe spaces of virtual classes where singers and people who just love to sing can do this Meisner technique and then put it into song, which is, I believe, one of the most visceral ways that we can emote. And so singing while feeling safe with these uncomfortable emotions has just been a game changer for me and my students. So if anyone's interested in that, Meisner in Music on Instagram.
You got 3 different Instagrams that kind of bring you a little bit different of everything. And I will say I had some laughs on the Jillian Paige lady. Okay. So I can attest to that, and I can say that it is a good place to check out, and I suggest any of our listeners who are listening to check it out as well. Thank you so much, Jillian, for coming on, and all of you guys at home. Let's continue to change that mental health into mental wealth.
Yeah.